welcome to this ET Now special. I'm Nayantara Rai, working from home. Are you a founder, startup, wondering what the hell you're going to do during COVID-19 and later? Have you not been able to figure out your cash runway? You're paranoid about what the future has in store for you. Well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? I've got a real special for you. Guess who can help you out? It's none other than Google, which has decided to identify startups. It has an accelerator program, particularly for the tough times that we are in. We're going to get you the global perspective when it comes to Google's latest playbook and what they're looking for in India, an initiative that has just been launched. For the global perspective, Sami is joining us, and for what's going to happen in India, it is Paul. Hi guys, welcome to the show. Thank you so much. Sami, I'll come to you first for the global perspective. I think this is the one time when no country is insulated. Everyone is stuck. Everyone is scared. Paranoid. Business plans have to be reworked. Cash runways need to be elongated. Should we first begin with some motivation for all the startups and entrepreneurs that are logging in? They're not alone in India.
We're very excited to share a few bits of news that we have today. However, this is in the face of a global crisis. There's no doubt. And so we don't want to sugarcoat it. There are challenges ahead, not just for startups across all sectors, but businesses and individuals everywhere. We do see opportunities for startups and entrepreneurs who are looking at this crisis, not from a short-term perspective, but with a long-term lens, seeing how the changes that are happening to our way of work, to our way of life right now may last. Not just for the next 6 months, but 18, 24 months, and have lasting impacts on how we view these aspects of our lives going forward. And we believe that the founders and the entrepreneurs who learn from what we're seeing right now, pivot, which is a term we use in the startup world quite a lot, subtly, in some cases, drastically change the business models to adapt and use some of the opportunities that have been made available to their advantage and the advantage of their users. We believe that they'd be very successful.
You usually only really hear about the startups that survive and thrive. But let's not forget, that's a very small fraction. And, is that fraction, you fear, going to get even smaller during COVID-19 and the next 18 to 24 months?
It's a great question. There's no crystal ball. So, I can't make a prediction that would be even reasonably accurate here. I do believe that if in any industry, probably the startup industry is one that is most likely to adapt the fastest to the changes, the challenges, and the opportunities we're seeing. By their own nature, startups tend to be very nimble. And so I do believe, once again, if they look at the challenges that users, businesses are facing today and adapt their businesses to solve for some of those problems, and we're starting to see that in a number of sectors. We're seeing that in healthcare. We're seeing that in financial technology and inclusion. So some very, very exciting opportunities that startups are already starting to see and succeed in, not just in supporting their users, but also in landing funding, bringing revenue to their businesses, growing their teams, and so on. So we do believe that while there certainly will be some that will face challenges and struggle through this period, those that make these shifts and focus in these new directions will certainly succeed.
Paul, now let me come to you for the question that every founder, every startup is wanting to know. One, what is the Google Accelerator all about that you're launching in India? How many are you going to allow into the program, and what are you going to do with them?
The Google for Startups Accelerator actually has been live, for the last 4 years or so, and specifically focused on India, specific topics, solving for India in the last 2 years. Right now, looking at this big inflection point, it's important for Google for Startups to actually look at how might we support and handhold founders through this new world. And that's why we're announcing that the scope of the Google for Startups Accelerator, which was around solving for India, startups using AI and machine learning to do that, is now broader to include startups that are looking to solve for the post-COVID world, helping with economic recovery after COVID. So we're looking at a much broader scope in terms of helping startups, first of all. And typically, we would take only about 10 in a class, right? And given the fact that we've already spent half a year where half of that half year has been locked down, right? And we've been pivoting and figuring out how to go forward. So we'll be looking at around 15 to 20 startups to help through this accelerator for the rest of the year.
So let me ask you this question, Paul. You're of course going to have the accelerator program. You said you've had it for 4 years. We all are very familiar with it, but this is a special one because it's also being done to pivot for the COVID times and the post-COVID times, right? Are there any particular sectors that would attract you a lot more? Like, for example, Sami just mentioned too, financial services and healthcare. But, for example, in India, we are seeing what's happening, let's say, with edtech at the moment.
That's right. I mean, some of those verticals Sami highlighted are absolutely going to be experiencing, a lot of new innovation. Healthcare and telemedicine, diagnostics, remote diagnostics is going to be a big one. We are looking at productivity and remote work because a lot of startups and other companies are flipping to the work from home model. How do we remain productive? Without effective tools and startups solving for niche areas, that would again be a really great opportunity. Financial inclusion, absolutely. EdTech, we're seeing a lot of online education picking up. There is so many educational webinars that have really spiked in the last 2 months or so. So I see a lot of opportunity, especially in that sector as well. And not only that, there are other emerging sectors, right? The events industry and the hospitality industry is affected. We are looking at AR and VR-based conferences. Now, how does that space evolve? How do we look at AI-based fever detection, contactless diagnosis? That's a huge opportunity as well. And most importantly, I think the last 3 or 4 months and the near term, middle to near term, we'll see a lot of mental health related support required in the ecosystem. And we're really keen to even look at startups in that space and how we can meaningfully nurture and mentor companies that are looking to solve for those problems and opportunities.
Okay, Sami, if I could come to you now. Incidentally, I love your T-shirt. I don't know if that's a Google bicycle, but having said that, you're here as well to give a global perspective to the Indian startups, help them go global. Is what I would imagine is a big focal point. Now, in India, your initial unicorns or those that really arrived big time, where if I may call it the Me Too startups. They filled a gap, a void, which didn't exist in India, and they were inspired clearly by companies that were global in nature. They picked up those kind of business models, that kind of business. Is that still the way to go forward? Because what you're also seeing is in the old economy, each country is looking inward.
We usually do see a number of waves in every startup ecosystem. Typically, you do start with the aggregator model and some of the retail models that exist. These are very popular, and any startup ecosystem is generally a great place to start. You see those graduate to more hyperlocal services, whether they're ride sharing or any of these other sorts of delivery mechanisms that happen typically in very urban environments where there's large populations. What I'm excited about in India and what we're seeing come out of India that's quite a bit different, and likely the reason why it's become one of the top startup ecosystems in the world today, is because they've graduated to another phase of their ecosystem where they're looking at much larger, much more systemic challenges not only within their country, but these challenges can easily translate to opportunities and what we call scale. So you can easily grow these businesses around the world. Typically, the businesses that we see that fit this criteria are using technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning to enable a really strong user experience and being able to process information at a very large scale. The industries we mentioned, again, we're seeing phenomenal startups in India focus on healthcare. We worked very closely with one called Nirmai that was looking at breast cancer diagnostics and being able to actually help identify cancers at an early stage using machine learning, even when treating patients in very remote parts of India. These are technologies that are globally relevant and can certainly help save lives anywhere. And so we are seeing that wave. in India is very promising. Paul and I have discussed it in quite a bit of depth, and we're excited to find more of these types of startups. Now, it's not a criteria per se that you must be solving global challenges to participate in any of our accelerators. Our accelerators are designed to provide whatever we can to the best of our abilities from a Google products and technologies perspective, but we also try to make our research available to our startups, our global network of mentors, and our network overall of startup ecosystem members, venture capitals, incubators, co-working spaces, and so on, to the benefit of those startups. And so ideally, we're solving big problems, whether they're in India, like our campaign, Solve for India, or anywhere else around the world.
Okay. So Paul, coming to you, as you solve for India, particularly given what's happening with COVID, your accelerator program's been around for 4 years. I think anything with Google will have obviously a lot of people excited, but do you want to share with our viewers some of the kind of startups that you have worked with in the recent past?
Yeah, I'll pick it off of Sami's suggestion on Niramai and talk about a couple more. So Niramai is AI breast cancer detection, but it's really nice to see how they've pivoted or added on solutions during the COVID time. They've added actually an AI fever detection module, where just with the help of infrared cameras, one can actually contactless diagnosis can be done on someone who's having fever symptoms or COVID-related symptoms. So that's a great startup that's pivoting for COVID. Another one in the playbook that I want to talk about a little bit is Visa. Now, I spoke about mental health. Visa is an app that actually is an AI chatbot where one can chat with this application and actually experience a lot of benefit if you're going through tough challenges from a mental health perspective. They have made a lot of their subscriptions open and free. A lot of their AI models have been evolving, especially because of the load due to the pandemic. A lot of queries coming in from people perhaps who are working from home and having challenges with that. Your work and lives have now collided. Both the contexts are merged, right? And context switching is happening. How does one deal with that? So companies like Visa, who've been part of our accelerator, have been helping meaningfully, with that particular area. And then there are startups like Gen Robotics. It's a startup that was started by student entrepreneurs and actually built robots to help clean manholes. But during the COVID pandemic time, they have pivoted their production, cycles to help build ventilators, right, in collaboration with the government of Kerala and IIT Kanpur and so on. So these are some examples of startups that have been meaningfully kind of leading into the opportunities presented by COVID, helping solve these problems. And if you go back in the past, there are many other startups that have actually graduated from the class, like DriveZ is a great example. ShareChat, you might have heard of, is another example of some of our alumni. So all of these startups have also kind of started to look at how might we move forward, after COVID, right? And the playbook has some really great tools to be able to take you through that journey.
Sami, with what's going on, is perhaps one of the worst. It is the worst recession we're going to go through, right? I think what a lot of the startups want is people to say basically, show me the money. So would this be the right program for them?
If I may just ask to clarify, so showing the money from what perspective exactly? Is that in terms of a fundraising perspective or in terms of the value that we can bring?
You're obviously going to bring value, but would Google be investing in any of these startups that will go through the accelerator programs?
So Google obviously has a number of investment vehicles and venture capital firms within Google Ventures, Gradient Ventures, and others. Those are separate from our Google for Startups Accelerator programs. Our Google for Startup Accelerator programs are really focused on solving specific challenges that startups face. So typically when they apply, and we've opened up applications, so we're looking forward to all those applications coming in so that we can also identify what are the major challenges that these startups are facing and looking to overcome to be successful in having this impact in the world that they want to have. And we, on our side, look at what are the engineering talent that we can match with them. What is the business talent the design talent, the people leadership talent, all of those things that we can help build upon, their strengths and ensure that, to the best of our combined abilities, they can succeed in that field. The intention is not to invest money directly into these startups, although we have a very strong track record. I'm sure Paul can talk a little bit more about that specifically for India, with those that do go through the program tend to go on to raise funding from the private investment market and so on. And Paul, please elaborate further if you'd like on the India side.
Sure, Sami. Yes, so if you look at profiling the class and their journeys of funding, we had more than $714 million raised in this portfolio of companies after they've graduated from the program at some point in their funding journey. And that's very encouraging to see that these companies have been taken on a lot of this mentorship input and support and association with Google to go on to be successful. But another important point when we talk about funding and cash flow is addressed in our playbook, right? The playbook is essentially provides a tool to think strategically about your startup's future. How might you reset right now, reassess your resources, and look at reimagining what the future looks like? Specific things that are covered there in the playbook that can help startups manage cash flows in the short to medium term. How do you manage your burn, right? Identifying new sources of income. Perhaps your core revenue stream has taken a hit because of the pandemic. Are there efficiencies and other opportunities you see within the company to can create an alternate revenue stream for the short to medium term while you restart your engines? Managing your productivity and work from home. We also, I was reading, in the news about startups looking to get rid of their leases for physical spaces so they can conserve and honestly be in a starvation mode when it comes to spending money and emerge more stronger out of this. So a lot of these tool sets, I think people would really benefit from it when they read in the playbook.
Exactly. You've got to reimagine it all, right? Like at least in India with the history of Corona, whatever anybody thought was true in February, early March, no longer holds true. And that's a really scary proposition. Sami, it's startups that around the world have to go through this. And even if you were just to rewind the Lehman crisis, we didn't know about Airbnb then. We didn't know about Uber, for example, then, and we don't know what the future is even now going forward. People are not going to be comfortable about shared mobility, for example, or travel anytime soon. So can I also ask you, Sami, and be cheeky here, for all of those that may not make it to the accelerator program for whatever reason it is, some advice that you may have for them? Some of it is obviously obvious: control your burn, control your costs, increase your cash runway. Can I be cheeky and ask you for that?
I'll try my best to respond to that. There are a few things we did highlight also in the playbook, but that I think are relevant for startups all around the world. Yes, controlling your finances is absolutely utmost importance. First thing we'd recommend to startups, whether they make it to our accelerator or not, is to ensure that they are looking at the trends right now and not assuming that this is going to be in the short run. Just like you said, certain industries, shared mobility, for example, the tension or the nervousness folks might experience about repeating or going back to what we used to think of a normal life, it may take much longer before we get there, and it may never look the same. And so those that adapt that mindset, start looking at these trends immediately and start adapting to that for their businesses and their business models, I believe that they'll be on a really good track to succeed in the long run. The second thing is what's impacting all of the startups right now that we've been speaking with is how to manage their team. In any small startup environment, if any of our viewers have experienced this, they know that keeping momentum, staying in touch on an hourly basis between founders and their employees is so critical, because the changes that need to be made in a typical time are so fast for a startup, even more so during a crisis like this, right? Where business model direction pivots, it's going to be subtle and it's going to be really fast, day by day by day. That if you're not in contact and regular touch with your team members, after a few days, you're suddenly very disconnected and going in different directions. So looking at how you manage your team, and we do support with some insights in terms of tools and best practices to keep a strong team momentum, motivation levels, and so on. We certainly encourage them to be very mindful of this. It's easy to forget this when you're focused on solving for a business and a customer, but it's so critical to the success of these startups.
Now, what we've also seen in India, for example, is, and there is a recession, there is a slowdown, it's bound to happen. It's happening in the Fortune 100 companies. Obviously, the startup universe cannot be insulated from that. And that is jobs drying up, unemployment being on the rise. And now you suddenly got these really intelligent kids, or maybe in their 30s, engineers, people from the financial world, who maybe gave up secure jobs, said no to a typical job to be a part of the startup movement. And look what's happened to them, with literally nowhere to go. Do you see that at least changing anytime soon?
I see the glass is half full, right? Absolutely, these very individuals, these founders, these super motivated entrepreneurs are the folks who will build for these unforeseen challenges. These are the folks that would create companies that would pull in more of this available talent pool into solving for the new world. So that's how I look at it.
Sami, tell me something. A lot of the founders obviously are very passionate. They have a vision. But sometimes what you also see is that they don't have the ability to give up on that vision. It's very difficult for them to reimagine because this was their baby. They imagined something. They worked 24/7 towards it. Are you seeing them as rigid, or are you seeing them being agreed to what you call pivot?
As a former founder myself who found themselves in a very similar situation, not with a crisis of this scale, but at least at my own company's level, I do believe that we're seeing founders look for support, advice, help more now than ever before. And that implies to me that they're being more open-minded about how to navigate it. One of the things, and what you're referring to is often called founderitis, and many founders are subject to this terrible disease of founderitis and believing that one direction is the right direction to go in. I think there is an assumption in founderitis that you know what's happening around you. I think what the last few months have really shown everybody is that this is an unpredictable time. And perhaps it's humbled many founders, certainly humbled myself as we look at our strategy and how we can support the ecosystem better. So I think that I am seeing that approach for more founders. They're seeing that, okay, this is unpredictable. What we thought 2 months ago, what we thought 6 weeks ago, what we thought a month ago are no longer valid. And so that reaching out and looking for support is happening more. And I feel very strongly and very passionately, and we do as a team, that by listening to the market, by listening to the trends that are going on, founders will be successful in the longer run. If the last few months have taught us anything, and certainly even this interaction right here, is that technological innovation is the type of thing that we need to get us through these types of things.
Let's address that very common phenomenon of herd mentality. I'm sure you've already seen it. Now a lot of startups want to be in a lot of the segments that you talked about, whether it is education or whether it's to do with healthcare or what to do with mental health, for example. You're suddenly seeing a proliferation of these startups. Not sure always that there's going to be a differentiator between all these startups. Or do you think that the space is just large enough for all of them, even if they don't have a stark differentiator, and later on consolidation can take place? Because we are seeing herd mentality.
So, I think it's absolutely a positive thing to see young entrepreneurs with ideas showing initiative and trying to build new things, right? And that underscores the need for programs like accelerators and incubators, because these are kind of the crucibles where the founders get honest feedback, get handholding to think through how unique your idea is. What's the impact of this idea? What's the potential scale? Is this heading in the right direction? How can you fail fast and move on to a new idea? these kind of mentoring kind of concepts are enabled by programs like Google for Startups Accelerator.
We often wonder that are we going to have a Silicon Valley, the equivalent of a Bay Area in this part of the world? Do you think that's going to happen, and do you think it could happen in India?
Well, the data suggests to us that increasingly the number of really successful startups, even unicorns, as they term any startups with a valuation of over $1 billion, the migration of the population of unicorns is spreading to Asia. And so we're starting to see a much more equal balance around the world of this concentration of successful startups. So what that does say to me is, well, I don't know that we should all aspire to recreating or replicating what happened in Silicon Valley, and there's history and there's companies and there's individuals who help shape that particular environment. While it may not make sense for all of us to try and replicate that, we may find what emerges is something potentially just as impactful, if not more impactful. I do believe that we're on a very positive trend, but it may not look exactly the same, and that's absolutely fine.
Sami, you're very diplomatic as well. And with that, guys, I'd like to thank both of you for taking the time out and for joining us here in ET Now.